until 5:30 p.m. today was a normal day. Let's take a look at how it started. I got up at 7 a.m., showered, got the kids out of bed, then made them breakfast and school lunches. After that, I woke Tracy up in time for her to put 11-year-old James and 8-year-old Maddie on the school bus. She was tired after a late tennis tournament. After kissing the kids goodbye, I left at 8 to go to my job as a construction crew foreman at the local government office. After my usual day, I headed home a little after 5. Today was payday, and I stopped at an ATM to get some cash for the weekend. The damn machine swallowed my card. No message or warning, just refused to give me cash or return my card. In retrospect, it was a bit silly to stick my credit card in an ATM to get cash. Sunday was Maddie's birthday, and I intended to spend Saturday buying her something special. The damn ATM swallowed that too. The bank was closed, so I just headed home. At home, I noticed Tracy's car wasn't in the driveway. I hurried to the front door, hoping she hadn't forced the kids back into the empty house again. She knew I hated that. After the last time, I told her to call me if she had anything important to do after school so I could get home early. As I was putting the key in the lock, a voice came from behind me. "Mr. David Brown?" I automatically replied, "Yes," and turned around. A middle-aged man was holding out to me a yellow A4 envelope with the name Slugden and Pike in one corner. He held it out to me. "You have been served, sir," and walked away. The embarrassment didn't match what I was feeling. I continued on my way into the house. As soon as I entered the house, I felt that it was unusually empty. 2 minutes later, I discovered that not only were the other 3 members of my family not in the house, but all of their clothes and belongings were gone. There was no note or message on the phone. Nothing at all. All I could respond to the confusion that engulfed me was a bloody yellow envelope. Sitting down at the kitchen table, I opened it. The first document, as I soon discovered, was a divorce petition. I had never seen such documents, but the title left no doubt. There were little sticky stickers sticking out of the side that said, "Sign here." I didn't bother to read it, but moved on to the next document. This one was a little harder to understand. I finally realized that it said I had 2 months to vacate the house and sell it. What the hell? The third document was even harder to interpret. It finally came to me. Some guy named Michael Smith wants to adopt my kids. At the risk of repeating myself, what the hell? The last document had a title that left no doubt. The restraining order stated that I was prohibited from coming within 200 yards of my wife, my children, Mr. Michael Smith and his home at 12 Riverview Drive, blah, blah, blah. I felt at a complete loss. The enormity of the change in my life threatened to finally crack my soul. Perhaps it would have if it hadn't been for one thing I didn't realize at the time. The problem was so huge that I couldn't encompass it in one fell swoop. My automatic emotional defense mechanisms kicked in, saving my sanity. My mind was blank at first, and then bits of certainty began to seep into my consciousness. My wife had left me to pursue a relationship with some guy I had never heard of. She took the kids and wanted me to let them go so he could adopt them. She closed all of our joint bank accounts and wanted to sell our house to get the money. Her partner in crime's name was Michael Smith, and he lived at 12 Riverview Drive. Worse, I was ashamed of my naivete. If Tracy was making such a move, it must have been a long time coming, and I hadn't seen a single clue. I knew Tracy wasn't that smart, so the only conclusion I could draw was that I was very stupid. I searched my memory for retrospective clues. Sure, about 6 months ago, Tracy had become a bit aloof, but when I pointed it out to her, she came out of whatever state she was in. Our life, which had become a shadow of its former glory, returned with renewed vigor. What's more, it became even bigger and much better than before. Gone was the sexually repressed wife I had known. In came the adventurous maniac I didn't recognize. I smiled, remembering some of the things that had been going on in our bedroom lately. Maybe it was the first time she'd experienced them with Mr. Smith? No, it wasn't Tracy. Solving that problem filled my veins with ice. Now I figured she'd always wanted to do things like this, but her repressive upbringing wouldn't let her do it with someone she respected. The logical conclusion to this was both sad and amusing. She lost respect for me 6 months ago, and it was sad. Hold that thought, Dave. You're going to need every opportunity to laugh at what lies ahead. I was still numb with shock when I made the decision to take my first action. It was a surprise move for those who hadn't read my last psych evaluation. My boss had gotten the stray idea to do a performance appraisal for all senior staff. I was proud of a line in their report. Mr. Brown doesn't really follow the rules. It was a subtle way of saying that I was a bit of a results-oriented cowboy and was getting the job done using the accepted rules only as a guide. This message was followed by the highest professional compliment I ever received at a performance review that year. My boss, who was as straightforward as can be, sat me down and said, "Dave, every time I have a difficult job to do, I assign it to you. On that day, I write down in my journal how I think you will handle it and how long it will take. I am happy to say that I have never been wrong once." He gave me the highest score after that, and we had a good laugh. Unfortunately, it meant nothing as I was already at the very top of the tree that my qualifications allowed. The need to support my wife and children prevented me from getting an engineering degree to jump to the next tree. Half an hour later, I parked not far from 12 Riverview Drive. Let's just say not 200 feet away. Tracy's car was in place, but it showed no signs of life. It was the swankiest neighborhood in our city, and the house I assumed was Smith's was as big as any other on that street. I suddenly thought the name seemed vaguely familiar to me. Could Michael Smith be that annoying guy from the TV commercials? The one who insisted on starring in his own commercials, which changed every week with monotonous regularity. He owned one of the city's few supermarkets. If memory serves me correctly, he took it over in a hostile takeover about 2 years ago. If I'm not mistaken, I was in trouble. This guy was a hot commodity. My reverie was interrupted when the front door opened. The guy walked out to his car and drove off. I recognized him as the same middle-aged man who had served me a little over an hour ago. This prompted me to open the yellow envelope I had brought with me and read the divorce petition. A declaration of war, you might say. Tracy demanded absolutely everything: house, car, money, alimony, child support. On top of that, I was going to be completely cut off from access to the kids. I knew Tracy was competitive. Not only did she needed to win everything, but she insisted on crushing her opposition in the process. This petition was typical Tracy. I was still mulling it over when, half an hour later, the door opened again. A well-dressed lady in her 40s came up on the top step. She stood there while a 50-year-old man carried a large suitcase out and placed it beside her, and then went back into the house and closed the door. The lady stood like that for several minutes, clutching a familiar yellow envelope in her hands. Finally, she rolled the suitcase up to the gate and started walking down the street toward me. The expression on her face was exactly the same as the one in my head. Total confusion. As she approached my car, I stepped out in front of her. She stopped 2 steps away from me and looked at me with glassy eyes red from crying. She was holding an envelope in one hand and the handle of her suitcase in the other. I just held out my envelope to her and said, "Click." She looked at mine, then hers, and burst into tears. She didn't move as I lifted her suitcase into the trunk and held the door open for her. Knowing we were being watched and might even call the police, I drove down the road, made a few turns and parked. Strangely, the realization that she was in the same predicament turned on a protective instinct and cleared my head a little. Even with eyes full of tears, she was a striking woman. Giving no indication that she was going to take the initiative, I opened the door. "My name is Dave, and I believe my wife has met your husband." She raised her grief-stricken eyes to me and smiled weakly. Watching her, I saw that the sadness had receded a little. "I'm Wendy. Your wife's name is Tracy?" I nodded. "I caught them in bed together last month. I thought things were getting better between us, and then tonight—" She burst into tears again. I gave her time to calm down. Somehow the news that Tracy had betrayed me completely and utterly didn't shock me as much as I might have thought. "Is there somewhere I can drop you off? To your family or friends?" "I don't have family here, and Michael has managed to alienate me from all my friends." "Have you eaten yet?" She shook her head. I checked my wallet. Less than $50. I reached a familiar, inexpensive restaurant and led Wendy inside. To make a long story short, we exchanged life stories. I was 32, married my sophomore year of university, and dropped out the following year when we fell victim to unreliable condoms. Tracy was against abortion, and I had voluntarily dropped out to provide for my family. Tracy didn't work, and I thought we had a good marriage. I resented my wife's laziness a bit, but I accepted it in our increasingly selfish world. It annoyed me that around other people, Tracy seemed like a devoted mother, but in private, she was a bit carefree and self-centered. I stopped bringing up this poignant issue. I was different. In public or in private, I loved my offspring tenderly. Since my parents were gone and I was an only child, my family was all I had. Wendy was 41 years old and the daughter of a mother who had abandoned her. Her father had done the best he could, but stress had reduced him to an early grave. Her marriage to the much older Michael Smith had been successful but childless. Michael blamed everything on her, refusing to take infertility tests and citing his many siblings. Her inheritance was spent expanding Michael's business. At my suggestion, Wendy went to the ATM across the street from the restaurant to make sure none of her cards were working anymore. The conspirators' attack was thorough and well-planned. Given time, we could have mounted a successful counterattack, but for now, we were discouraged, confused, and lost. In retrospect, I can say that other people's problems were the best therapy for me during this time. Wendy still didn't know how to plan for the future, so I invited her to stay in my large but suddenly empty house until she could develop a plan. I assured her that I was only offering this out of decency. I had no ulterior motives. We drove home and I helped her get settled in the guest room. Then we shared a bottle of wine. She reached out and put her hand over mine when I told her I was afraid I wouldn't be able to see the kids as often as I wanted to, if at all. Moreover, she even wept at my obvious pain that my upbringing had prevented me from experiencing on my own. Our mutual exchange about problems could have been conducted like a classic counseling session. By the end of the first bottle, we had come to some insightful conclusions. Their tactics were clearly designed to keep us on our hind legs and prevent us from keeping our own lawyers. Whatever Tracy's motives, she was clearly playing to win. As usual, the idea of dividing the children and property equally after our marriage broke up was out of character for her, so an amicable end to the marriage was out of the question. Wendy seemed like a perfectly decent person and could be a useful emotional ally. We retired to our bedrooms knowing that we were not completely alone in the world. We spent the next day distracting each other so that new circumstances wouldn't overwhelm us. When she started to get discouraged, I cheered her up with stories and jokes. When I sensed darkness approaching, she would make me laugh. It was a very strange day, but we supported each other. She was a bit of a mystery. For a gorgeous woman, she was oddly shy. With no other source of funds, we pooled our money. With the help of what I had in my closets and budget shopping, we didn't go hungry for a couple weeks. We had fun shopping like the poor people we were now. For Wendy, who had been in clover since she married Mr. Smith, it was an obvious culture shock. We struck up a conversation about future plans, but stopped it when it became too painful. Saturday night, we watched a good movie together. Sunday morning, Wendy was still lounging in bed when I had some unexpected visitors. Tracy's father, John, and younger sister, Beth. I invited them over for a cup of coffee. We had always gotten along well, and what's more, I suspected that Beth had always had a thing for me. She'd been single for a few years now, ever since her ex-husband ran off with his secretary. While the coffee was brewing, Wendy appeared in the kitchen doorway in her bathrobe. She came out apologizing, clearly embarrassed to be seen like this. John raised an eyebrow and looked at me coldly. "Before you embarrass yourself, Dad, this is the wife of the man your daughter is cohabiting with. He kicked her out of the house on Friday, the day I met her. I offered her a place to stay because she had nowhere else to go. You see, I'm not the only one your offspring is trying to crush." "I'm sorry, Dave. Tracy's mom was going to come too, but she's too embarrassed. We know what Tracy did to you, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm very angry with her. I didn't bother to tell her to get out of our lives, but you know how it is. Grandkids and all, right?" "I understand, Dad, and thank you for your thoughts. What confuses me the most is why she's doing this. I understand her tactics. Taking all the money, leaving me penniless, and taking the house is her game to win. But why?" I realized from the look on his face that the news of the money and the house was previously unknown to him. His eyes widened. "You mean she took everything?" "Yes, Dad. All our accounts seem to be closed. I don't have a single bean. She handed me a notice to move out of the house and forbade me from seeing the kids." John's eyes grew wide as saucers as he realized the full horror of what his daughter was capable of. He couldn't look me in the eye. "I'm so sorry, Dave. What a bitch. But I can answer your question. Yesterday, she explained to my mom and me why. In a nutshell, money. She said you've had enough and she wants more. She thinks sleeping with a rich guy will get her what she wants. He's in his 50s, and I can tell by the way she talks about him that she doesn't like him very much. I'd be careful if I were him. I think once she marries him, she'll leave him and take whatever she can get. How I raised such a mercenary bitch is beyond me. That's pretty damn rich, Daddy. It was her decision not to terminate my first pregnancy that caused me to drop out of university. If I had continued my studies, I'd be at the top of a tall tree right now, not the top of a small one. John just shrugged. So why take the kids, Dad? We both know deep down she's not much of a mother. Why not just take the money and leave me with my kids? I don't know, son. At this point, I noticed Beth looking at her father incredulously, but she didn't say anything. Obviously embarrassed to the extreme, John made his final apology, and they left, after which he shook my hand. I made him promise to hug my daughter on the day she was born. Beth hugged me and whispered in my ear, "I'll be back in an hour." It was all quite intriguing. Wendy and I were eating breakfast when two mutual friends of Tracy and me showed up. They had seen Tracy and an older guy at the restaurant the night before and wondered what was going on. I explained the situation from my perspective and Wendy told her story. They were both offended by Tracy's behavior. They were both puzzled as to why she had left with the kids. Apparently, they had seen Tracy acting the good mommy act when there were people around. We had just finished telling them the story when one of Tracy's friends showed up. This time, we all told the story. She was just as horrified as everyone else. We hadn't finished when Beth came back. She pulled me aside and held out an envelope. "There's $1,000 in it, Dave. Let's call it atonement for the bitch sister's guilt, okay?" "No, I insist. Take it." It was very difficult for me, a proud man, to accept the envelope, but I was desperate. I took it, thanking her sincerely. "I also wanted to tell you that Dad hasn't been completely honest with you. Tracy came over yesterday and picked up the kids. She told us almost everything. I got the rest out of her later. I have to say, she's playing a very complicated game, Dave. Asking for the money and the house was shithead's idea. They intend to use the money as a bargaining tool, which they will reluctantly do if you cooperate, grant the divorce, and let him adopt your children. He is childless and really wants someone to leave his empire to. After your divorce, she will convince him that she intends to have a child with him. After that, he will get his inheritance and she will get her way of life. If you can wait that long, Dave, I'm sure she'll lose interest in Jimmy and Maddie and return them to you." I stared at Beth incredulously. It all made some kind of cold, sociopathic sense. He already had a trophy wife, and that answered my question as to why he was attracted to Tracy if she wasn't that attractive. The lure of an overtly prolific wife would be a strong magnet. However, I couldn't agree more with Beth's final thoughts. During both pregnancies, Tracy suffered from severe preeclampsia. During her second C-section, she decided to have a hysterectomy. Apparently, she did not tell her family or her new beau. This, as well as her other actions, spoke volumes about what a conniving bitch my wife had turned into. What did Tracy look like when she was talking to you, Beth? If you're asking how she felt about what she did to you, Dave, the answer is guilty. She tried to hide it, but I could see it was tormenting her. She knows she ruined a good man, but you know her. That won't stop her. What about you, Beth? Why are you supporting me? It's just the right thing to do, Dave. My sister always bullied me as a kid. What she's doing to you is just wrong. It hurts my feelings. Remember, I've been where you are now. I know what it's like to be abandoned. You were there for me when my mistake pissed me off, but not Tracy. I'm glad now I have a chance to return the favor. I'm on your side, Dave. I've always had sympathy for you, and I just can't see you being treated like this." "Well, Beth, I just don't know what to say. I can't promise. No, silly, I don't want us to sleep together. That would be too weird. Besides, I've been dating a guy for about a month now, and we're serious. I'm happy for you, Beth. You've always been my favorite relative. I hope this guy is really right for you." "Thanks, Dave. Just trust me. I'll help in any way I can. Think of me as your personal spy." At that, we hugged, and she left. I went back to Wendy and our friends. By late afternoon, we had to explain what was happening over the phone to 3 more friends. All of these gestures of support and sympathy were heartbreaking. So much so that after we had dinner together, we discussed the future. But before we did, I pulled two $200 lots out of Beth's stash and gave Wendy one. The rest I showed her where I'd put it in the cookie jar. With Beth's gift, I figured we could hold out until the next paycheck. I told Wendy about what Beth was doing today. She wasn't surprised. Her childlessness was increasingly becoming a problem in her marriage. Wendy noticed that I always seem agitated at this time of day. I wondered. It's 8:30 in the evening. For as long as I can remember, I've been reading stories to my kids at this time and putting them to bed. I saw tears in her eyes as she asked, "What are we going to do?" Well, my first priority is the welfare of my children, and that certainly doesn't mean I'm going to leave them in the hands of these schemers. So I must have the means to take care of them, and that means finding the money. I haven't decided yet how I'm going to take my revenge, but I find the thought of leaving them unpunished very insulting. What about you, Wendy? Her beautiful face suddenly hardened. If he had simply asked me for a divorce and offered me a fair share of our property, I would have calmed down. Now, however, I feel humiliated. Please don't take this the wrong way, Dave, but right now, I just want to see him burn. She said it with such force that I vowed never to take offense at her. I smiled to let her know I understood. Well, now we know what. Let's discuss how. We stayed up for another 3 hours exchanging ideas. We discussed and discarded every possible way to raise money to buy lawyers. But there was no joy. As mostly law-abiding citizens, we limited our discussions to mostly legal and ethical methods of winning. We came to nothing. Finding no obvious way out, I asked Wendy to tell me about the Sheetheads' wealth. They had moved to town 2 years ago, and he had ripped them off by buying a house and a store. Later, using the store, house, and boat as leverage, he borrowed $2.5 million to expand. That was the only weakness I saw. We discussed how to use that weakness to attack him. If we could jeopardize his business, it would give us leverage to get better meetings with the kids. I didn't care about money, but my kids were everything to me. Wendy was in favor of burning down his business, but I didn't feel comfortable attacking the means by which this guy made his living, not even to a lowlife like him. We went to bed too late for Sunday. Monday at work, I told my boss what was going on. He helped me in any way he could. He gave me a little vacation time and an advance on my annual leave. I tried to do my regular job, but it was difficult. I missed my kids every second of the day. After lunch, I would give up and just spend time with the controller and the administration's legal counsel. I should probably stop and tell you about the people I work with. People look down on those of us who work in local government. Everyone knows that it's a very safe organization to work for, but it doesn't pay well. So we, almost like outcasts in society, band together to look out for each other. If I'm overseeing road work and we have some bitumen left over, let's just say that neither the supervisor nor the lawyer has gravel driveways. By the end of the day, I knew a lot more about how finances work in business and what the boundaries of legality are than I did in the morning. At home, Wendy and I discussed the previous day again. She had cooked dinner after spending the day looking for work. She worked as an accounting assistant and then quit to become a wife. We were relaxing after cleaning up when the phone rang and a visitor changed my life. At 7:30 p.m., the phone rang and I picked it up. "Daddy, where are you, Daddy?" It was Maddie. A lump threatened to close my throat. "I'm here, honey, at our house." "I don't like it here, Daddy. Please." At that moment, I heard Tracy's voice. "Madeline, who are you talking to?" And then the phone disconnected. Wendy saw the look of thunder on my face and asked who it was. I replied, "Maddie," and headed for the door. Wendy chased after me and tried to hold me back. 5 feet 2 inches versus 6 feet 1 inch. Yeah, that was going to work. "Don't, Dave. That's what they want. They want to put you in jail for violating a restraining order. Don't do it." That made me stand up. Instead of heading out the door, I headed up the stairs to my bedroom to be alone with my emotions. I don't know how long I lay there, but suddenly there was a quiet knock on the door and Wendy walked in, carrying 3 children's books. "Will you read me a story?" I stared at her, then at the books. Silently, I gestured for her to come in and made room for her to lie down next to me. I picked out Maddie's favorite book and started reading. By the end of the book, I was calm again. I leaned over and kissed Wendy on the forehead like I had kissed Maddie for 8 years. She smiled. Up until now, I had chased thoughts of children to the back of my mind. The thought that I might lose them, or that they would live in single-parent families was too heavy for me emotionally. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I was stunned to see standing there was Sophia, who was never Sophie. She was Tracy's best friend, and she and I had always gotten along well. I invited her in and introduced her to Wendy. Sophia had a hard time making eye contact with either of us. After a short conversation, Sophia said, "I just wanted to apologize to you, Dave. Tracy put me in a position where I knew in advance what she was going to do. That's why I've rarely seen you for the last 5 months. She made me promise not to tell you about her affair. I'm so sorry. I tried to talk her out of it, but you know how she is when she's up to something. I knew she was going to divorce you and fight over the kids. I stopped talking when she stopped talking. In front of us stood a girl with an extremely troubled conscience. My first reflex was that she was the enemy, and if she expected sympathy, she would walk away disappointed. Then it dawned on me. Perhaps there was another source of inside information here. For a decent person, guilt can be a serious motivator. I only needed to supplement it a little. It's all right, Sophia. I understand the terrible position you've been put in. Thank you, Dave. You know, she closed our accounts and left me without a dime, don't you? Yeah, she was bragging about it when I saw her tonight. I say bragged, but I think it was just bravado. I think inside she feels a lot of guilt for what she did to you. Up until now, Sophia had struggled to hold eye contact, but now she was looking firmly into my eyes. For the record, Dave, I didn't believe for a second what she said about you hitting the kids. I've seen you and her interacting with James and Maddie, and I know you wouldn't do that. What? Don't you know? She told child services that you're a bully. She said they couldn't prosecute because there was no evidence, but the allegations alone were enough to get a restraining order. From the shock of this news, I leaned back in my chair. Damn slut. I was 10 times better than her parents. Both of my guests just stared at the kaleidoscope of emotions that must have played out on my face. I ignored all but the last one. Pure, implacable hatred. When my whirling mind calmed down, I realized with dead certainty what I needed to do. If one side in a fight fights clean and the other fights dirty, the outcome is inevitable. I knew I had to fight as dirty as I could imagine. Then I had to get a better imagination. I don't know how long it took before I gained the ability to speak. Will this woman stop at nothing to win? I've never raised my hand before. Yeah, I can see it in your face, Dave. Like I said, it didn't sound right when she told me. I know a lot of fathers, and they always go out with the boys to bars or fishing. I know you spend every spare minute with your kids. I've seen you with them, and I know you wouldn't hesitate to put a bullet in a bullet for them. Damn right I would. They're my future. What a lying, conniving bitch. You know what her full game plan is, don't you, Sophia? We've learned from another source that she intends to use our money and this house to gain full custody of the children. She then wants Wendy's husband to adopt the children while claiming she will have one with him. Apparently, he is desperate for an heir. I'm sure she'll put off trying to have a child with him until they're married, saying she doesn't want their child to be born out of wedlock. But she can't have another child, Dave. I know that, and you know that, but Mike Sucker-Smith doesn't know. By the time he finds out, she'll have traded half our modest house and bank accounts for half his fortune. The collateral damage to me, the kids, and you is pure spit territory for Tracy. Me? Yes, you. What kind of best friend would lie to you about her husband abusing the kids? I stopped and watched Sophia comprehend the ultimate truth. Her best friend was a sociopathic bitch. Clearly embarrassed, she apologized and walked away. I tried to go upstairs and indulge my emotions again, but Wendy grabbed me and hugged me. Neither of us said anything. We just silently enjoyed the companionship. Two people in pain and seeking comfort. Eventually, I thanked her and we settled down for the night. I don't know how much sleep Wendy got, but I certainly didn't get much sleep. Resentment over Tracy's tactics fought the pain I was feeling over Maddie's phone call. I think I gave up around 4 in the morning, when the outline of the plan was already comfortable enough for me. The next thing I knew, Wendy woke me up by opening the curtains. Good morning, sleepyhead. Breakfast is ready. After showering, I headed downstairs. Even though it was still early, I called my boss and asked for time off. He readily agreed. Wendy just stared at me across the kitchen table. Wendy, how dirty do you want to get? Yes, David, I didn't realize you cared. She ruffled her hair flirtatiously in the back and smirked at those words. I smirked back. Cheeky bitch. I meant how dirty do you want to make this fight? Try me. What are you thinking? Nothing in particular. I'm just thinking about ruining your husband's business, destroying my wife's support base, and completely ruining her plans. I'll leave them both a shivering broken wreck, that's all. Sounds like a good start. I have some thoughts on that too. We compared notes. After breakfast, while Wendy poked around the internet and researched libel and slander laws, I called Tracy's mother. Turns out I was right. She had no idea Tracy had contacted Children's Services and was appalled by her daughter's tactics. I then called Beth and repeated my story. She was going to disown her sister on the spot, but I convinced her to hide her disdain and become our Trojan horse. By the time I ended my calls, Wendy had already done her research and we compared notes. We then spent a friendly hour in the workshop making two signs. Half an hour later, Wendy and I were sitting in lounge chairs on either side of the main entrance to the building where Michael Brown worked. I knew from the research I had done that the building was on land leased from the local authority. We were not trespassing. Our chairs were in a prominent position, but in no way interfered with the flow of customers. I held a large sign that read, "Talk to me about how the owner of this store stole my wife and children from me." Wendy held a sign that read, "Talk to me about my husband's morals." It soon became apparent that Wendy's was getting more than I was. That was to be expected. She was much easier on the eyes than I was. A pattern soon emerged. People were reluctant to stop and talk when I was alone, but once one stopped, the others felt comfortable enough to let curiosity override restraint. When they stopped, I simply told them the facts of the story. Wendy's research confirmed what we had both guessed. In our country, telling the truth is perfectly legal. If we stuck to the facts, we didn't face libel charges. To our satisfaction, almost everyone we talked to had decided to shop elsewhere that day. People seemed genuinely offended by the actions of Tracy and Shithead. Men by my story, women by Wendy's. Although the impact on business was negligible, our plan was moving forward. In between Joe Public, we had some knowledgeable visitors stop by. Just before lunch, the store manager came out to us and threatened to call the police. Wendy filmed me offering to give him the emergency phone number for the police. The police did show up just after lunch, and after some discussion with the managers, asked us to move our chairs back a bit so they would be less of a traffic hazard. Our faith in the success of the plan was strengthened around 4 p.m. when a reporter from a local radio station asked permission to speak with us. As Wendy and I told our stories, quite a few people gathered. They seemed most interested in my accusation of child abuse. Child abuse is such a sensitive topic that the alleged perpetrator rarely brings it up. They disappeared, promising to stick to the facts we told them. We stayed to say goodnight to the manager as he closed the doors that evening, promising to see them in the morning. We were both thrilled with how we were covered on the local news that night. Of course, the next morning we wished him a good day. Shortly thereafter, 2 uniformed security guards showed up and successfully got between us and our potential interlocutors. This time, I called the police. They arrived and spoke to the manager, presumably about his role in suppressing our right to free speech. I treated them to coffee from a van that had been set out to treat the assembled crowd. We seemed to be the hottest entertainment in town that day. Wendy helped us out by dressing in the perfect abandoned wife outfit. Holy cow, this woman could be an actress. She definitely has the looks for it. We didn't notice 2 guys in suits approaching us. We were too busy watching the state television news van parked across the street. By the time I was served with a cease and desist order threatening to sue for trading losses, currently estimated at $30,000 a day, the entire scene had been digitally taped. The lawsuits were hastily removed, leaving us to talk to a reporter about our little human interest story. Once again, we stuck to the facts and begged them not to embellish in any way. I held in my hand a letter with the Slugden and Pike letterhead scribbled on top. After another successful day, we were on our way home when the store doors were already closed. Quite a few people had stayed there for the promise of new entertainment, and it was evident that people were hesitant to leave. We hurried home to watch the nightly news. I jokingly suggested that Wendy find an agent. However, when our story aired, it became uneasy. The camera crew was stationed outside the Crook's mansion. When I saw my bewildered children returning from school being hurried out of sight, it was like a knife to the soul. Uh-huh. I read another story to Wendy that night. We also received an average of 10 phone calls a day from friends and acquaintances expressing their displeasure with Tracy's actions. I thanked them and offered to vote for her friendship with my feet. Tracy must have become the loneliest woman in town. At 9:30 p.m., Sophia knocked on the door. She didn't respond to my greeting. She just walked in and gave me a very tight hug. And when she broke the hug, she just put the memory card in my hand, turned and ran away, tears streaming down her face. Intrigued, I carried it into the house and Wendy and I plugged it into the computer. Talk about a dynamite. It was a recording of Sophia confronting Tracy, lying to herself and child services. It was a recording of Tracy's confession as she desperately tried to justify her actions. And it all lasted until Sophia cut herself out of her former friend's life for the last time. Our excitement subsided a bit when we realized that despite the illegal recording, the tape was of little value. We considered sending it anonymously to our new friends in the media, but that would have gotten Sophia in trouble. Our newfound determination to be nasty had some limits. Unfortunately, the next day, when we were served by none other than Reginald Pike LLB himself, there were no journalists around. He tried to film both of us together, but we didn't want to cooperate. Eventually, one of us had to film what was going on. We were each sued for a huge amount of money. What a waste of time. They, of all people, knew we were broke. After that excitement, we went back to our lonely vigil. Yes, I said lonely. There were very few people in the store that day. Perhaps the sudden publicity from other stores selling the same items as Mr. Smith's was to blame. It's easy to imagine how competitors, sensing his vulnerability, began to increase their market share. Shark, meat feeding frenzy. During this time, we were filming ourselves and our fan club. Every time a truck arrived, we would film it as well. The logo of the delivery company on the side was especially prominent. Maybe they could be persuaded to become former suppliers? At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, two excited employees came out of the store. They said they had been warned at a staff meeting that they would have to give up their jobs. It was painful. Wendy's interviewed me, urging other good companies to consider hiring all the extra employees. That case was filed away. At 3:30 p.m., suddenly the state news van showed up again. 3 more guys in suits showed up, but this time without ties. In full view of the cameras, they announced that they were also lawyers. They were moved by our story and the injustice of what was happening. They offered us their services to defend our divorces on a pro bono basis. Is that what pro bono means? After the camera stopped rolling, their chief, Brian Coulson, explained that he was a former partner of Pike and Slugden, who had been nailed by the other two. There's no worse rage than a scorned lawyer. We invited them to join Wendy in her office at the coffee shop across the street. They were still there when my workday ended, and I joined them. Over 15 cups of coffee, we left, signing papers that they would represent us in our divorces and in my fight for custody of the children. Old man Coulson's eyes lit up when we told him about Sophia's record, but we refused to give him a copy. If he were a regular lawyer, he would have reached for an atlas to point her out on a map in response to any talk of ethics. By this point, our story was relegated to the public interest segment at the end of the news about every other night. That night, our new friend Brian looked really good on the news. The open neck shirt looked great. Come to think of it, we had a classic remora and shark relationship. Remoras are little fish that follow the shark and get protection and tidbits from the shark. In return, the shark gets a parasite-free life. If Mr. Coulson likes to think he's a shark, that's fine with me. That week and the first half of next week passed with one development. I missed my offspring and Wendy more and more, and Maximie's buttock grew increasingly numb. Mr. Coulson made sure the press covered our motion for a temporary order to recover half of our liquid assets, an order to vacate the premises, and an order for Tracy to come see my children. The interest in our newfound celebrity was also well covered. Australians have always supported the underdog. I think the state news reporter liked Wendy too, which didn't hurt our cause. Perhaps it was the high-profile nature of the case that got us into the hearing on Monday of the following week. I was scheduled to appear first, and Wendy was scheduled to appear right after. In preparing for the hearing the second half of the week, I decided that Mr. Coulson was also a bit of a dirty fighter. It was one of the traits I admired in him. We stayed away from the leafhead business on Thursday, but after learning that customers were starting to sneak in again, we resumed our vigil on Friday. I'm damn glad we did. At 9 o'clock Friday morning, Listhead drove into the parking lot by itself. He was followed by the highway patrol with flashers. Maybe having a Merc with blinkers and customized license plates wasn't such a good idea. It took the guys in blue a full 6 minutes to detect something amiss, but they succeeded. I waved cheerfully as they drove out of the parking lot after handing over the ordinance. Wendy videotaped Shithead entering his business through the front door. We wanted to prove that any interaction started on his initiative and that he was the one who violated our restraining order. An hour later, Wendy pointed out the parking lot where two more suit-clad gentlemen were getting out of a car with the logo of a local bank. They headed toward the store. Wendy approached them. "It's the 24th today, isn't it?" "All day." "Guess who had to pay off a loan yesterday?" I only grinned. We went to bed early. My vacation pay had just been transferred to a new bank account. It was an occasion for a modest celebration. Instead of our usual evening in front of the TV, we went to the movies. That weekend, I had trouble sleeping. Since Monday was to be the first court hearing to decide the fate of my family, I was very nervous. Unexpected visitors on Saturday distracted us, albeit pleasantly. An old friend, Wendy, saw the ad and sought out her longtime pal. Then, late in the afternoon, my mother, father, and sister Tracy showed up. I stopped by the store and we had an impromptu barbecue. Wendy entertained them all while I was gone. She was a hostess by nature. While I was gone, I pondered the motives of our guests. I suspected that now knowing all the facts, Tracy's parents realized that I had righteousness on my side and suspected that I would eventually prevail. They wanted to ensure continued access to their grandchildren. A pleasant time was had by all. At one point, Beth managed to leave me alone. "How's your back, Dave?" "Fine, Beth. No sharp pains when the metaphorical knife stabs you in the back?" "What, your sister's not happy?" "No, you're not playing by her rules, Dave. You should be begging and pleading by now. Your little picket outside the store caught them off guard. Saying they're a little disgruntled is like saying the Pope is a little Catholic." Tracy is a fidgeter, but of course she blames it on you. Butter doesn't melt in my sister's mouth. Mom and Dad don't talk to her, and Sophia was the first of her friends to leave the ship. According to my dear sister, she and her lover are afraid to even go to restaurants. Others have talked about it too, even at the country club. Keep it up, brother. You're winning. Oh my, how sad, never mind. How are the kids? Not bad, Dave. They're a little sad and confused, as you'd expect. I get there every 2 days or so and play with them. Here, I've got some pictures. She pulled out her camera, and I flipped through them. Tears came to my eyes. Only in one of them was my baby Maddie smiling, and it was a forced smile. I thanked Beth fervently for all she was doing, and we joined the rest of the guests. As we left the room, she pulled a bunch of keys out of her pocket and dropped them on the floor with an exaggerated gesture. "Gosh, I think I dropped the keys to the Mercedes, your wife's car keys, and the spare key to the house on the floor. How careless of me." We both grinned again and went back to our normal world. Sunday morning, I had just woken up when I heard, "Hey, Slob, it's your turn to make breakfast," shouted across the hallway between my bedroom and the guest bedroom to me. I made breakfast, then wrapped a white towel around my waist, hung a tea towel on my arm pretending to be a maid, and headed out for delivery. At 10 a.m., the third Monday of my vacation, Wendy escorted me to a family court hearing. That's when I got my first good look at Mick Shit. I realized it was him when Wendy hissed and tensed when he walked in. He was in his 50s, fat and bald. I found out later that he had looked quite trim when he seduced her 15 years ago. Not being experts in family matters themselves, Slugden and Pike had sent along an assistant. He was an old friend of our Mr. Coulson, but that didn't stop him from doing his best for his client. Coulson first laid out his version of the financial problems, and the opposition responded in kind. Their tactic was that Tracy would need our assets to support her children. After Coulson presented my petition for joint custody, he tried to get an order that the children be interviewed by Children's Services to get their views. Through legal technicalities, the opposition rejected this attempt. Her boyfriend then turned to Tracy, who had been looking daggers at me all morning, and asked for a short break. For a few minutes, she and Coulson whispered. Then Mr. Coulson approached me. Your dear wife wants you to know that if you don't back down, she will make public all of her accusations that you are abusing her and the children. She is willing to give up all claims to the house and money if you give up the children. I looked at Tracy, who was smiling smugly. Then I looked at Wendy, searching for strength in her. All morning she had been alternately smiling and frowning, depending on whether we were winning or losing. Coulson continued, "You know what you have to give me, don't you?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small tape recorder and held it out to him. Sophia had given me permission to do this as a last resort. Coulson turned to his opponent again, and I watched the villain's face lower as he was shown a few edited moments. Their voices raised enough that I could hear some of the words. Unacceptable, screw the media were among them. After a few minutes, Coulson's opponent left the room. 10 minutes later, he returned and sat down next to Tracy without saying anything. The judge was called back to bed. The bad guy got up and became the good guy. Your Honor, on behalf of my attorneys, I am compelled to inform you that due to new evidence, we can no longer represent the defendant in this case. Tracy looked stunned and confused. The judge confirmed the attorney's recusal, and we all watched him pack up and leave. I leaned over to Coulson, and he whispered in my ear, "Rumor has it that Messrs. Slugden and Pike have lost a bunch of business over this case, and a few more are threatening to leave. I guess our little record made them run from bad juju. Don't worry, the judge will see what today's little performance was all about. He's playing golf with my boss." Before I could ask where this was going, the judge made it clear. He adjourned the case, giving Tracy 2 weeks to find another representative. He said he didn't want to rule on the financial issues until the child custody issues were resolved, which of course hadn't come to that yet. He doesn't want to lift the restraining order because there are allegations of abuse that have yet to be challenged in open court. Hell, 2 more weeks of separation from the kids. He moved on to Wendy's case. There were no reporters visible outside the court. They were chasing a juicy, rare story about lawyers dumping a client. That same evening, Slugden and Pike released a statement that mentioned the words conscience and common sense. Speculation flared with renewed vigor. Any sense of victory I felt was muted. I missed my children. The tension began to take its toll on Wendy as well. She began to feel guilty for surviving on my means. I reassured her, telling her that without her emotional support, I wouldn't have gotten this far. I didn't feel like sitting outside the damn store for another 2 weeks. Getting media attention was getting harder and harder. I was already imagining how by the end of the week I would have to sit there naked to get the camera's attention. I decided to skip Tuesday and just observe how many customers they had, several times a day. Just after lunch, my phone rang. It was a mysterious guy named Henry who wanted me to meet him at a coffee shop across town. I asked Wendy to watch us from afar with a camera to make sure nothing untoward happened, or if it did, evidence was obtained. Henry turned out to be the assistant manager from the store. The disguise and the dagger were necessary to keep the rumors from reaching us. Incredibly, he insisted that I resume my post outside his store. It seems the bank was forcing Mr. Smith to sell the store quickly and cheaply to cover the debt. They couldn't expect to repay the loan while he was at the helm. Henry and many other employees were in secret negotiations with the bank to buy back the stock. At this glad tidings, Wendy and I gladly took our seats. More good news from the lawyers came later in the week. Wendy handed them a stack of documents as we chatted with them. It seems that one of the items was an agreement made when the inheritance was transferred. She bought a stake in a business that was supposed to pay monthly dividends. She invested that amount back into the business and ended up with an astronomical amount of money. Saturday was a day off. The store began closing on that day to avoid paying overtime. We invited Beth and her parents over for another barbecue, as well as a new old friend, Wendy. Beth briefly told us about the recent events at the Smith mansion. Apparently, things were not going well. That was fine with me. Beth believed it was paranoia that had made Tracy suspect her of being a double agent and not welcome her visits over the last week. With no news about my kids, I was a little worried. We had just finished eating when the doorbell rang. I opened the door for Tracy. "Are you supposed to be here?" "Apparently, if I come to you, it'll be okay." I invited her in. She walked in but stopped when she saw her mother and father. Wendy threw a hate-filled look at her and then went upstairs where I assumed Beth was also hiding. The looks her mother and father threw at her weren't much better. Tracy started to look very uncomfortable and called me into the kitchen. Dave, for old time's sake, could you back off a bit? Why, dear? Hasn't the trade turned out the way you envisioned? You know it didn't. I just thought that by taking all the money and the house, you'd be forced to relent and let Mick adopt the children. Then, when I remarry, we can prove to the poor guy that you're no longer capable of bearing him a child and take him for all he was worth. Tracy stared at the table for a long moment. Honestly, Dave, after I got his money, I was going to come back to you. I thought I could enjoy being a rich man's wife in the meantime, but you've ruined it. His business is failing, and we can't even go out after that smear campaign you started. Last time we went to a restaurant, an old lady just spit on me. Don't mention the police. They've stopped me 3 times this week. I'm 3 points away from losing my license. I couldn't believe it. Tears came to my dear wife's eyes. Can't you just back off and let me pursue my dream, honey? I thought you were a student of history, Tracy. Who said those who don't learn from the mistakes of history are doomed to repeat them? I compare your surprise attack on me and our family to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the British colonies in Asia on December the 7th, 1941. Because of the nature of the attack, Churchill and Roosevelt had no choice but to demand the complete surrender of the attackers. If you had politely asked for a divorce before you did the dirty deed to our marriage, and the asshole you copulated with had done the same, we could have parted amicably and you would have lived happily ever after. Instead, you chose the Pearl Harbor method, and now I will accept nothing short of total surrender. I can't believe you think I'd trade my children for money. Don't you know me at all? I saw it dawn on her that she had been so focused on her long game that she had missed some minor details. Then came the realization that she wasn't going to get anywhere with her emotional approach. Her face hardened and took on an expression more recognizable to me. So Mick wants to talk turkey tonight. Can you make it? Yes, and I was born yesterday. Come to your place and get arrested for violating a restraining order? Well, we could come here. No. Why not? Because if Michael Shithead Smith comes within 100 yards of me, I'm going to rip his head off and spit in his neck. Tracy looked shocked. She'd never seen this side of me before. Why? What did he do to you? Let me see, honey. Entertained my wife for God knows how long and incited her to blow all my money. Stole my children. What's not to like about that? Tracy stared at the table again. The thought of having to negotiate for my children rather than relying on the whims of the court system prompted my next comment. How about Skype? Yeah, that might work. What time? Hold on. I need to coordinate a time with my partner. What partner? Wendy. We make all the decisions together. That old bitch? Who are you calling old? Have you looked at who you've been sleeping with lately? How old is she? You know, I don't care. She's been a good friend when I needed it, so who cares? I went upstairs and discussed it with Wendy. She was all for it. After all, what do we have to lose? Back downstairs, I made arrangements with Tracy for 9 o'clock that evening. She left, throwing an indecent look at her parents. The last thing she did was look around the house. Again, I swear there were tears in her eyes. I went back to the party, which ended around 8:30 p.m. I put my laptop on 2 chairs on the sides of the table, but Wendy said she would sit off camera. She said if she didn't watch Michael Smith for the rest of her life, it would be too soon. At exactly 9 p.m., I logged into Skype and the screen showed the happy couple sitting side by side. Wendy had showered and was sitting in her robe at the entrance to the kitchen. There were no opening pleasantries. It was clear from their actions and body language that we were facing 2 people vying for dominance. But I already knew they both had different goals in mind. By the end of the session, I realized that he was a little more dominant than she was. It was clear from Smith's initial gambit that he believed he was still in an advantageous position. So, Brown, let's talk turkey. Let me make one thing clear from the outset. Mr. Brown or David, okay? I don't care which one is which. Shithead clearly hadn't expected my firm voice. His eyes widened with shock, and he glanced at Tracy with an edge of his eye. He realized he'd lost his first moral point. Okay, David. Where's my skinny, barren ex-wife? Once again, I remind you to be polite. She's listening, but she's not looking at you. Apparently, she never liked snakes. If you can't be polite, I'm going to stop this right now. Understood? Point two was in my favor and everyone knew it. I heard Wendy giggle softly upon hearing the word snake. Tracy couldn't help herself. She looked at McSheath and frowned. I'll tell you what, David. You stop your vigils outside the store. Maybe even call a press conference and say it was a misunderstanding, okay? I'll put the house in your name and give you half the money back. Then I'll agree to let you see the kids every weekend. I can't be much fairer than that, can I? What about Wendy? What do you care about her? At this point, She'd had pushed Tracy off center stage. I'm willing to give her 10% of the profits once the business is profitable again. I looked at Wendy. They say a picture paints 1,000 words. In Wendy's painting, the middle figure stood resolutely above the rest. I smiled. Wendy declined your kind offer. At least I think so. I repeated Wendy's gesture toward the camera. As for your offer of visits, I must say that I've decided that neither of you can see my children, so you can shove your offer up your ass. Be reasonable, Mr. Brown. Once I have a child of my own, I won't give a damn about yours, and you can have them all to yourself. I looked at Tracy's reaction. She turned a shithead and frowned. But it wasn't the frown of a person angry that her chosen one had just rejected her children. It was the frown of a man annoyed that the cat had just been let out of the bag. So you want me to leave my children in the care of a man who looks at them like a bargaining chip 12 days in 2 weeks? It's your choice whether or not to use Vaseline when you stick your proposal where the sun don't shine. Both of my opponents spoke up at the same time. Tracy had won this contest. Come on, Dave. You're not still mad that I left you for a better man, are you? At that moment, Smith got up and stood behind Tracy. He put his arm around her shoulders. I watched the scene unfold. It was obviously a premeditated tactic and meant that they were recording our conversation, hoping to provoke a violent reaction so that they could somehow demonstrate it in court. I was not moved in the least by the sordid spectacle before me. However, I was not unaffected when a bare arm came around my shoulders from behind and something very soft and warm pressed against my neck. Be a gentleman and don't look back for a minute, they whispered in my ear. Wendy turned my head and kissed me on the lips. After a couple of moments, she broke the kiss and we both looked at the screen. A stormy expression appeared on Tracy's face. Most people fool themselves to one degree or another when they look in the mirror. However, the difference between what Tracy saw in the mirror every day and what she saw on the screen was too great for illusions. She suddenly realized what the bidding really meant. Get your hands off my husband, bitch! I turned and whispered in Wendy's ear, feeling the heat on her neck. Nice tactic, she whispered back. I expected him to pull something like that, not her, but okay. Remember, don't look back. To my horror, the feeling of warmth was gone. I kept my promise and didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The little selfie in the top corner of the screen was already visible. I may be a gentleman, but at the end of the day, I'm human. Both people on the other end of the connection muttered something, but in my reverie, I had no idea what. Then the doorbell rang. While Wendy got dressed, I went outside to open the front door. It was my kids. As soon as the door opened, they wrapped their arms around me and mumbled something incoherently. James clung to my chest and nestled against one side, Maddie against my other leg. I fought back the tears again. I was in seventh heaven. All I could hear was the intermittent words. Aunt Beth gave me a camera. Wendy showed up and I asked her to keep our internet friends occupied for a while. Then I took the kids to a quiet place. When they calmed down, I got a story out of them, one at a time. They both had sore feet from their nighttime walks after sneaking out of the mansion. Aunt Beth gave James a camera, and he recorded his mom saying, "Eat your damn breakfast." Both kids were shaking from hunger and fatigue. I brought them glasses of milk and told them to drink it slowly. I also told them to wait here, and a nice woman named Wendy would be here in a minute to pick them up. Back in the kitchen, I gestured for Wendy to come in and asked her to watch the children. I then took a very deep breath and sat down at my laptop. Tracy read something on my face and went silent, but shithead couldn't take it anymore and spoke up. I just jumped up at him. Tracy, where are the kids? Upstairs in bed. No, they aren't. They just walked through the dark to get here. I paused again to contain my anger. Shithead, they're both telling me they didn't eat properly. Tracy was the first to come to her senses after those hissed accusations. We'll come and get them soon. No, you won't. The day I leave them alone with you assholes, I'll see Satan skating to work. If I see you anywhere in the neighborhood, I will take whatever physical measures I deem necessary to keep you from seeing them. Shithead grinned triumphantly. He'd gotten the threat he'd been counting on. Thanks, asshole. The connection went dead after that. I checked that the conversation was recorded on my end and went to find the others. Maddie was sitting on Wendy's lap, chatting about her favorite subject, horses. James was sitting next to her and looking into her face. I pulled out the leftover pizza and again asked them to eat it slowly. I knew what was coming next, so I took the camera from James and copied it to my laptop. I created a folder and put the camera files with Sophia's voice recording and the Skype session file in it. I fast-forwarded the part of the Skype recording that had the snippet I wanted and noted the time. Along the way, I took a picture of Maddie's wrists and added it to the folder. Another half hour passed before the doorbell rang. I had just enough time to hug both kids before they calmed down and called Beth, asking her to come over. When I was done, Wendy was reading a story to the kids. At about 10:30 p.m., two female daycare workers knocked on my door. I invited them in and offered them drinks. They were aggressive and hostile and insisted that they had come to return the children to their mother. I'm afraid this is unacceptable to me. They tried to insist, but I sat them down, showed them the bruises on Maddie's wrist, and made them tell me how she got them. I made James describe his hunger strike, then showed them a video of Tracy yelling at them and a short clip of Shithead saying, "Once I have a baby of my own, I won't care about yours and you can take them back." So you're really going to send them back to that Wednesday after they were allowed to walk around here in the dark? They both looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, sir, but we have to enforce the current order. You have been accused of abusing them and your wife. If we leave them here and they get hurt, we're in big trouble. We have superiors to whom we must answer to. I deliberately kept my voice calm as I replied. I can tell you that if you bring them back to an environment where you have evidence, not just accusations, and they get hurt again, I will be the one to answer to. Are you threatening us, sir? No, just giving you an idea of what life will be like. Before the older of the two could call the police, I suggested an alternative plan. I told them that my wife's sister was on her way over. If everyone agreed, I would gladly hand them over to her as a neutral party, provided both parties agreed not to take them from her. The older woman disappeared briefly, presumably to call Tracy, and then came back and said it was done. I can imagine how happy Tracy and Shithead were about that. I imagine how confused they were, having trapped me in a trap where I threatened them on tape. So I said goodbye to the kids with a heavy heart, promising to do what I could for them. They both liked Aunt Beth, so they took it normally. Wendy said nothing when I disappeared to wallow in my emotions again. The next day, Wendy offered to go to Beth's house to help get the kids ready for school. I agreed. For the rest of the week, she picked them up from school and drove them to Beth's. I went to work as there was no point in continuing the vigil. A phone call from Henry confirmed that business at the store had picked up and his plans were going well. The following Monday, we appeared before the same judge. Tracy and I had settled everything but custody last time, so everyone was focused and prepared. This time, Wendy appeared first, and both sides presented information about her financial problems with Mr. Smith, including unpaid dividends. Mr. Smith was clearly hoping this wouldn't come out, and nearly fainted when it did. The interests of the conspirators were represented by some out-of-town firm, and as far as I could tell, not a very good one. The judge would not give a verdict on the actual amounts until forensic accountants had estimated the value of the unpaid dividends, but indicated that after Wendy's dividends were paid, the total share would be 65/35. He acknowledged that he had been harsh because of Mr. Smith's outrageous behavior. Wendy indicated that she was pleased that Mr. Smith would keep the house after paying his share. As a status symbol, she knew the house was very important to him and she would not want to live there. In my case, their attorneys foolishly asked that an illegal recording of a Skype conversation be admitted into evidence. We readily agreed, which confused their lawyers. They, of course, only played back the part where I threatened them. That and Tracy's testimony that I had abused her and the children were designed to portray me as the villain. I stoically endured and sat. Before I went to trial, Beth and Sophia were brought into the case, and the picture was widely painted that I was a far better father than Tracy was a mother. Beth's words were so powerful that the judge asked her to confirm that she was Tracy's sister, not mine. Tracy could not believe the betrayal and actually left the courtroom during those 2 sessions. Then it was my turn. Mr. Coulson told me about the first ambush, how the kids were walking towards my house at night. He managed to get the facts about the hunger strike out of me, emphasizing that the children's mother and foster father had no idea what was going on. He presented the children's testimony obtained by Child Services on these and other issues. Because the opposition presented the Skype recording, they failed to object when we showed them the other part of the recording, namely, Tracy's reaction when her partner said he didn't care about my children. Coulson attempted to introduce the video shot by James. The opposition tried to deny the motion, citing the rules of evidence. The judge took umbrage. "Gentlemen, this is not a criminal court. The same rules do not apply here. My job is to do the best I can for the children of the marriage, and I take that responsibility very seriously. Mr. Coulson, you may show the videotape, and while you show it, may I listen to the other tape that was rumored last time?" I saw Tracy and Shithead cringe when I heard her yell at her kids to go to get their own breakfast. It was nothing compared to their reaction when a 10-minute tape was aired of Tracy admitting to Sophia that she had lied to Child Services about me bullying her and the kids. She could be heard on the tape saying that the whole thing was Michael Smith's idea. The judge just stared at her for the last 4 minutes of the tape. Her head was buried in her hands. Michael wasn't happy either. Apparently, Slugden and Pike never explained to them why they had recused themselves. When opposition counsel was asked if there were any answers, he just stood there opening and closing his mouth like a goldfish. The judge said he had one question for me, and I knew what it was. "Mr. Brown, can you explain the open threat you made to Mrs. Brown and Mr. Smith? I should also mention that it has come to my attention that there have been rumors of threatening behavior against child support workers." I was well prepared for this. For a change, the man was going to use an emotional argument in an argument with another man. I had done my research and everything was carefully planned. I stood up and looked him firmly in the eye. "Yes, Your Honor, I can. You have heard the same evidence I have. My children were taken from me through neglect and abuse. I have always believed that my duty as a father, no, not that word, but my privilege, is to protect my children from harm. I am willing to die for my children, as I am sure you are willing to die for yours, Your Honor. The fact that I risked my freedom by threatening my abusers didn't even make me break a sweat. Yes, I threatened them, and I would threaten them again in a heartbeat." For a moment, I thought the judge was about to be embarrassed and applauded. I could see the admiration in his eyes. He nodded to me and withdrew for a moment to think. He returned less than an hour later. I was given full custody of the children, and Tracy's access to them would be at my discretion. I heard Coulson sigh at that. This was something he had never seen before. The judge ruled that all legal fees should not be covered by the utility bills. I was awarded the house and 65% of the liquid assets. Again, the judge admitted he was harsh on Tracy because of the methods she used during the ambush. The smoke from the journalist's pencils was almost visible. A few of them spoke to me outside of court, but I have no idea what I said. I was hovering on cloud 9 at that moment. Wendy took the kids home and I took all their stuff from the mansion. Tracy and Shithead yelled at each other the whole time I was there. At home, I just hugged and cuddled the kids. That night, those damn stretch marks wanted Wendy to read them bedtime stories instead of me. They said she was better at it. Fair enough. After reading each of their books about 1,000 times, I got a little bored with it. The next night, Wendy and I threw a party where Mr. Coulson and his team were the guests of honor. There were 2 journalists at the party, so hopefully Mr. Coulson got the publicity he deserved. I overheard him say pro bono to one of them. Tracy's entire family was present, as well as most of our mutual friends and some of Wendy's growing list of new acquaintances. Even my boss showed up, making a few snide remarks about having a celebrity working in his department. I raised a toast to Beth, elevating her to the rank of favorite aunt. It was quite late when the party was reduced to a family gathering. I sat at the table with Beth and her mom. John was snoozing on one of the couches. On the other, Wendy was reading a story to the kids. My mother-in-law brought up a burning question. "Dave, how often are you going to let Tracy see the kids?" This question had occupied my thoughts since this morning. "I don't know, Mom. I guess it depends on what she wants. If she wants to see them, then I won't stand in her way. After all, children need the influence of a loving woman if they want to grow up balanced, don't they?" My ex-mother-in-law just sat back and shook her head. You know, Dave, for a smart man, you can be a real cretin sometimes. What the hell? Your kids are sitting there with a woman they clearly love and who just as clearly loves them and you. I turned so fast I almost knocked over my chair. Wendy looked up and saw three people looking at her, one of them with an incredulous expression. She instinctively realized what this was about and blushed thickly. I stood up and slowly walked over to the couch. I know my next sentence won't win any awards, but it was sincere. Apparently the position of the mother of these children is now vacant. Would you like to apply for the job? My response was a woman who, as if by magic, rose from the couch and melted into my arms. We kissed long and deeply. The kids were playing sardines again, snuggled up against us. It all seemed so right. We put the kids to bed and said goodbye to our guests. I carried Wendy into our bedroom. On the threshold, she uttered, "Have you proposed to me yet?" "Yes, silly, I did." "And I thought I had. Did I say yes?" "Not officially, I suppose. Why?" "Well, I'm obviously not fit to be a working foreman but not an engineer. Maybe when I have some money you can go back to school." "Sounds great to me. And anyway, who's not good enough for who, Grandma?" Epilogue. Basically, Tracy never contacted me about seeing the kids. They never asked about her since Wendy was too busy. The bank brokered the sale of the store to a consortium of management and employees. Henry, being a local celebrity, asked me to unveil a huge, under new management sign to attract media attention. By the end of the first week, the store was up and running again. My bank account soon became smaller than Wendy's. As agreed, she took only cash, and her ex took the mansion and enough startup capital to start over. If family rumors were to be believed, Tracy was still with Michael. Perhaps things would have stayed that way if I hadn't run into Mr. Smith one day. He remarked wryly, wiping the smile off my face as his appeal began. Apparently, his legal team really thought some evidence should have been excluded. I asked Mr. Coulson to look after the court registry for me. It was he who discovered that everything had been delayed while the happy couple went on a month-long cruise in the West Indies. To be fair, by pure coincidence, Mr. Smith received the facts while they were standing in port. It was simply instructions for the care of Tracy Brown, discharged after a C-section and hysterectomy 9 years ago. How was I to know that the ship was moored in a country where it is very disliked when men hit women? Being a basically honest person, I never asked Wendy how all those homeless people got into the mansion and trashed it to the point where it was uninhabitable. After all, if I discovered evidence of a crime, it's my civic duty to report it, isn't it? Who would have thought that insurance companies would refuse to pay out money if people leave their homes unguarded when they go away for a month? Where did I put the keys Beth gave me? Was it the burned-out Mercedes I saw yesterday on the side of the highway? At the end of my freshman year of university, I offered to work part-time until graduation to help look after our child, but Wendy said she didn't know how long she could tolerate being the wife of a man with no qualifications. Bloody snob. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.